Listen, after 2.5 hours of stolen files, alien devices, religious doubt, body possession, Roswell footage, repressed memories, and humanity standing on the edge of war, Spielberg does not give us the day after disclosure. He gives us the first instruction, and then he cuts to black. The biggest twist in Disclosure Day is not that aliens are real. The biggest twist is that Spielberg does not treat disclosure as the answer. He treats it as the test. The movie spends its entire runtime asking who controls the truth, who is ready to hear it, and whether humanity can stop screaming long enough to listen. The film was never really about aliens arriving. They might. I don't know. I never met one. It's about humanity being interrupted before we destroy ourselves. That is why the ending is so divisive. Spielberg does not show a civilization changing after disclosure. He stops at the moment where change becomes possible, and he leaves the rest of the question with us. So, before we get into spoilers, here is the clean setup. Disclosure Day is about a cybersecurity expert named Daniel Kellner who steals classified evidence from Wardex, a private organization hiding the truth about alien contact. At the same time, a Kansas City meteorologist presenter named Margaret Fairchild experiences a strange awakening during a live broadcast, speaking a non-human language that Daniel somehow understands. Their stories pull together as Wardex tries to contain the truth, while the world sits on the edge of a possible global war. The movie becomes a chase toward disclosure, but underneath that chase is a bigger question. Can humanity listen before it destroys itself? That is the non-spoiler version. Now we are going all the way in. And that is the lens I want to use for this spoiler breakdown. Yes, this is an ending explained spoiler review and analysis. We'll discuss not just what happens in Disclosure Day, but why Spielberg tells the alien story as a story about faith, fear, control, and whether humanity can still listen. So let's get into it. Welcome back to A Constantly Racing Mind, where every frame tells a story. I'm Rob, and around here we talk sci-fi, horror, action-adventure, prop culture, and all things geek. If that's your thing, hit like, subscribe, and stick around because this one is going deep. Disclosure Day is a 2026 sci-fi mystery thriller from Universal Pictures and Amblin Entertainment. It is directed by Steven Spielberg, written by David Koepp from a story by Spielberg, and stars Emily Blunt, Josh O'Connor, Colin Firth, Eve Hewson, Coleman Domingo, and Wyatt Russell. The film is rated PG-13 for some bloody image, action violence, and strong language. It opens wide on June 12, 2026 and runs about 145 minutes, which is about 2 hours and 25 minutes. And you can stay for John Williams, but you're not staying for a bonus scene. You saw my non-spoiler review. I gave this film a 4 out of 5. I called it a beautiful mess. Now it's time to talk about why and what that ending actually means. Full spoilers start now. If you haven't seen the film, go watch it first, then come back. You've been warned. Alright, let me walk you through what actually happens in Disclosure Day, and I'm going to go give you just about everything, because the devil is in the details with this movie. There are small choices Spielberg makes that completely change how you read the bigger moments. So grab a coffee or whatever you're drinking, and let's get into it. To start off, I'm beginning with the ending. Having Margaret look into the camera and say, listen, and smash cut to black is going to drive some people up the wall, but it's a deliberate, philosophical move. The movie refuses to show the Monday morning. It won't tell you if the people kept going to work, dropped their weapons, or just slot aliens into the outrage cycle. Instead, it hands the question back to you. Are we actually capable of listening, or are we stuck in a permanent panic? In that sense, it's less an answer than a mirror. I am going to save the full plot recap for later, but there is one scene I need to pull forward now, because it frames everything I think the movie is trying to say. It is the Hugo and Noah scene. On the surface, it's just another Wardex confrontation. Noah is remote viewing, and I'll get into more of that later. Hugo feels it coming. He gets the other whistleblowers out of the room so they cannot be identified. Then Noah starts talking down to him like Hugo is some naive traitor who cannot see the larger picture. But what Hugo says back is the movie's whole argument. Hugo mentions empathy is an evolutionary advantage. Alright, that exchange, empathy as an evolutionary advantage. It's the movie's thesis, and here's what Spielberg actually lands it. Emily Blunt is the anchor of the entire movie. The traffic stop scene where Margaret casually slides into the cop's head and tells him to go buy his wife red velvet cakes is the most charming sequence Spielberg has shot in years. She's funny and off-kilter, but totally grounded. Once the flow fully takes over, she shifts into something sharper and almost otherworldly. The way her eyes track, the way her voice drops, the change in physicality, you get a complete transformation without anyone stopping to explain it. That's the controlled chaos I've been talking about. Raw panic, comedy, multi-languages, tactile physical performance, all in one character. If you saw Obsession or my reviews on the film, Indy Navarrete does something similar, but in a horror setting. The reveal in the replica house is pure weaponized Spielberg. You've got young Margaret singing "Someday My Prince Will Come." The woodland creature disguises deer, fox, raccoon, cardinal, leading the kids into the snow. The pan down from the animal prince to the three-toed alien, the glowing house. That's actually a ship, and finally the crown-like device on their hands. It's wonder and terror in the same breath. That sequence finally answers the movie's quiet question. Why these two? Because they were chosen, because they've been unknowingly altered since childhood, because Margaret, empathy, and Daniel, logic, are engineered keys designed to decode the message together. It retroactively justifies Hugo's whole plan. He can't do disclosure alone because he literally lacks the biology to complete the transmission. Jane could have been a stock kidnapped girlfriend. Instead, by the end, she's the one who escapes through the bathroom window, the one who physically delivers the device to the station, the one who digs a crucifix into her palm to resist Noah's control. Exorcism imagery, stigmata imagery, and pure spite rolled together. That scene where she fights off possession with pain and faith is the most metal thing Spielberg has done. It's also the movie's clearest faith can expand moment. Religion isn't the enemy of disclosure. Abuse of power is. This is not the first time Spielberg asked his audience to take a leap of faith. I think Colin Firth's Noah works because he's not a cartoon evil. He's a man who weaponizes his own grief and wrapped it in scripture. When he quotes Matthew 26:39, "Take this cup from me," to justify invading Jane's mind, it's not just villainy, it's theological violation. He's the kind of person who thinks salvation requires your surrender to his control. Firth plays him with quiet, almost pastoral authority. No ranting, no screaming, just calm, patient intrusion. And that's what makes it disturbing. The third act broadcast is also where the script answers a real-world criticism. Why not just leak the files online? I would argue that an internet leak would be ignored, as it has been for months. But the film understands that if Daniel had simply uploaded the files anonymously to a forum or cloud drive, the modern public would have instantly dismissed them as deepfakes or fake AI slop. By taking the data to a trusted news station, the characters force legitimate journalists and news producers at 30 Rockefeller Plaza through Missouri to pause and technologically verify that the footage is not AI generated before broadcasting and sharing it globally. This professional vetting legitimizes the story and completely bypasses the hurdle of internet skepticism. The disclosure event does not remain isolated to Margaret's local Kansas City television station. Once Daniel uploads the massive archive of classified files, the feed goes viral because it's immediately picked up by other major global networks such as CNN, BBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox News, with worldwide news anchors actively reporting on the event in real time. By cutting into all the media feeds, the characters turn the disclosure into a cascading global viral event that the world cannot ignore. There are many scenes of the whole world looking at their phones. That's what we do nowadays. And many say nobody's always looking at their phone. Yeah, that's true. But if the guy next to you sees something that's going on that's crazy, he's going to bump you. He's going to tell you. He's going to say, hey, take a look at this. It's everywhere. Everybody has a phone. Everybody can look. They don't have to. They don't need to. But they could. And to be quite honest, what would be the point of showing people not looking at their phones? It's not very cinematic. It's not very Spielberg. What do you guys expect? While digital files and videos can always be debated, the ultimate reason the broadcast commands absolute viral attention is that their final trump card is physical. During the climax, Hugo wheels a towering ancient live alien, designated as In Vivo 17, directly into the live broadcast stage. You cannot upload a living alien to a Dropbox folder. Placing a physical extraterrestrial in front of a live studio camera provides the ultimate undeniable proof that completely shatters any remaining public doubt and forced the entire world to watch in stunned silence. So for months I was deep in the rumor mills. Future humans, time-traveling anthropologists, the melancholy Ubermensch, and I kept thinking back to that scene in Paul. You remember, the Simon Pegg, Nick Frost movie from 2011? There's the moment where Seth Rogen's alien character is on the phone with Steven Spielberg in 1980. And Paul says, "How about cellular revivification?" And Spielberg says, "I don't know what that is." And Paul says, "It means healing, Mr. Spielberg." And then Spielberg, this is the best part, Spielberg says, "Yeah, right, healing. Like by touch. Like maybe his finger lights up on the end." That is the Spielberg I wanted for Disclosure Day. The one taking notes from an actual alien. The one who had insider information. The one who could make something truly weird and true. But the movie we got, no alien consultants, no future humans, just a solid, safe, slightly frustrating first contact story, and I kept waiting for the finger to light up. It never did. Now the hard part. This is where things fall apart, even inside its own rules. The CGI animal work is bad enough to pull you out of the movie. For some, it's fine. My wife thought it looked just dandy. Me, not so much. The cardinal that wakes Margaret, the deer, and the raccoon in the flashbacks, they look weirdly rubbery and dated, especially in contrast to how tactile everything else feels. Coming from the director who gave us Jurassic Park, it's jarring. It's not nitpicking, it actively undercuts what should be some of the most magical, uncanny moments. I don't know what's going on, ILM, but, get your act together. At 145 minutes, you feel the runtime. The motel, the safe house, the train, the replica house. Structurally, it becomes a loop of run, hide, discovered, escape, repeat. The destination, the broadcast station, is strong, but the road there sometimes feels like laps around the same track. For a movie obsessed with urgency, it spends a surprising amount of time spinning its wheels. Enough said on that. The devices are my biggest structural complaint, and I think it's warranted. They can power buildings, mask people, possess minds, project illusions, and more. We're told they degrade and can burn out. Margaret overloading one at the station is a good idea, in theory. But the movie never lays down clear boundaries. Because the rules are so fuzzy, the devices end up doing whatever the script needs in the moment. Or at least that's how I feel. So while they're seated early enough to avoid classic Deus Ex Machina, they still feel like magic wands. Whenever characters paint themselves into a narrative corner, the tech opens the door. That erodes the tension because after a while, you assume the gizmo will handle it. Outside of Noah, the antagonists are weirdly incompetent for an elite shadow operation. Boyd, God Boyd, is relentless but rarely effective, and the rank-and-file Vortex FBI guys miss things that are right in front of them. There are moments where the characters might as well be crunching gravel behind their backs, and no one notices. That disconnect between elite threat and plot-required blindness gives the heroes heavy plot armor and undermines the sense that Vortex is genuinely dangerous. When Daniel steals one of the Vortex cars, he finds the keys inside the car. How convenient. And then he drives right straight through, past them, into the house, and steals Jane. The DEFCON 2 frame should be doing a lot more work than it does. The film opens on the brink of war with North Korea, uses nuclear tension as a backdrop, and then mostly lets it sit there as set dressing, brings it up only one or two more times. Given the real 2020s landscape, Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, Iran, and so on, picking only North Korea makes the geopolitical canvas feel oddly narrow and frankly safe. The irony is that the alien message, "Step back from the brink," is universal. It applies regardless of which flag you point at. But the script doesn't explore that. The war scare is just a ticking clock device rather than a fully integrated thread. You could still squint and get the intended idea. We are always on the brink, and somebody finally shows up to say stop. But the movie doesn't really earn that urgency, it just assumes it. I'll have more of this in a minute. The clicking language is another place where the film almost stumbles into something brilliant and then doesn't. Click languages exist. The Khoisan language, Xhosa, Zulu, real human cultures have used clicks for thousands of years. In the movie, Margaret's clicking on live TV is treated as purely alien noise. The script never engages with the fact that this could be a bridge to existing human language families. Imagine an alternative version where Daniel realizes the alien phonetics line up with Khoisan patterns, implying contact has been happening in Africa for millennia and was ignored or suppressed. That would tie perfectly in the film's theme of who gets to control the narrative, and ancient aliens? Instead, the clicks stay a neat performance detail and nothing more, which makes it feel like a missed thematic layup. But structurally, this is not a calm first contact story. This is a chase thriller, stolen files, moving targets, a world on the edge of something bigger than anyone can control. And that structure lets Spielberg pull from multiple areas of his career at once. Spielberg's career breaks into a few big lanes. There is the sci-fi side with films like Close Encounters, E.T., AI, Minority Report, and War of the Worlds. There's the action and adventure side with Jaws and the Indiana Jones film. And there are people stories like Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, Lincoln, Munich, Empire of the Sun, and The Fabelmans. But the spiritual side is different. That is not one separate category. It runs through all the others. It shows up in the faith and relics of Indiana Jones, the afterlife of Always, the calling of Close Encounters and the grace of E.T., and the moral weight of films like Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan. Disclosure Day lives right in that overlap. On a craft level, Spielberg is still Spielberg. The 70-second tracking shot of Daniel crashing through the safe house wall to rescue Jane, the train sequence with the piano's Margaret mid-panic attack, Daniel placing her hand on the string so she can feel the vibrations instead of hearing the chaos. The long walk through S4 where Margaret uses the device to project herself as an old man and just slips past guards. These are all the sequences driven by blocking and camera movement, not frantic cutting. John Williams' score stays mostly restrained but keeps threading that mix of wonder, dread, and melancholy that kind of ties back to Close Encounters and E.T. It's that classic cosmic unease you love, the sense that the universe is bigger and sadder and more beautiful than we're ready for. You can hear it somewhat, but it doesn't linger long enough to be overwhelming and thematic. When you hear tubas thumping, you know a shark is coming. When you hear the Superman theme song, you know help is on the way. You know Indiana Jones will prevail. Same with all John Williams' other music. Here, it serves the film. That is both a positive and possibly a negative. Depends on how you felt if we needed another blockbuster musical score. Spielberg alien stories usually are not about creatures from somewhere else. They're about humanity encountering something larger than itself. Close Encounters of the Third Kind treats contact almost like a religious calling. Roy Neary is not just chasing UFOs, he's pulling toward revelation. E.T. turns alien contact into healing, innocence, sacrifice, death, and resurrection imagery. Very Christian viewpoint from a man who is Jewish. War of the Worlds takes the opposite approach. It's not soft wonder, it's apocalypse helplessness and family survival under cosmic threat. AI, artificial intelligence, is not alien-focused, but it fits the spiritual lane because David's search for love becomes almost religious. He wants a miracle. He wants to be made real. He wants love to defeat design. 3/5 of Indiana Jones is not sci-fi. The Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls is. It matters because Spielberg has repeatedly used sacred objects and religious awe inside adventure stories. The Ark, the Sankara stones, and the Holy Grail all ask what happens when human greed touches something holy or sacred. Always, the movie, makes the afterlife literal. It is one of the cleanest examples of Spielberg using fantasy to talk about grief, love, and unfinished emotional business. So Disclosure Day does not come out of nowhere. It sits at the crossing point of Spielberg's alien wonder, religious imagery, political distrust, and late-career humanism. David Koepp is important because the movie needs a writer who understands movement. He is not just a sci-fi writer, he is a structure writer. He knows how to take a big idea, turn it into a chase, a countdown, a reveal, or a survival problem, and his Spielberg connection matters most. Jurassic Park, The Lost World. Jurassic Park. War of the Worlds. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls. Disclosure Day. Koepp has also major genre and thriller credits outside Spielberg. Mission Impossible, Spider-Man, Panic Room, Stir of Echoes, Snake Eyes, Secret Window. The pattern is useful. Koepp often writes stories where ordinary people are trapped inside systems bigger than they are. Corporate systems, government systems, supernatural systems, technological systems, media systems. That fits Disclosure Day perfectly. Daniel has the files, but he does not control the system. Margaret has the message, but she does not fully understand it. Jane has faith, but her body and belief are invaded. Hugo has the truth, but he has carried it too long. Noah has power, but loses the moral argument. Okay, let's start with the best thing in this movie, Emily Blunt. She plays Margaret with a kind of controlled chaos that is genuinely captivating. One moment she's funny, the next she's terrified, the next she feels completely transformed. There's an unpredictability to her performance that keeps you locked in. There's a live broadcast sequence early on that tells you everything you need to know. She is operating on a different level here. Oscar conversation is absolutely justified. I like Emily Blunt in this role because her career has already crossed so many lanes. She has done sharp comedy in The Devil Wears Prada, genre action in Edge of Tomorrow, The Adjustment Bureau, and Sicario, intimate sci-fi horror in A Quiet Place, musical fantasy in Mary Poppins Returns and Into the Woods. She also stars in an award-level drama, Oppenheimer. Disclosure Day is pulling from all of that. Margaret is not just an emotional center, she is the human signal in the middle of the noise. I knew very little about Josh O'Connor. I thought he was an interesting choice for Daniel because he does not seem like a typical blockbuster lead. Watching the trailers, he has a nervous internal quality. You can see the wheels turning before the character says anything. Apparently a lot of people know him from The Crown, where he's played Prince Charles, but his film work in God's Own Country, La Chimera, and Challenger shows a different kind of range. He can play wounded, strange, arrogant, fragile, and funny without smoothing the edges off the character. That's important here because Daniel is not the classic action hero carrying the truth. He is the guy with the files, the math, and the burden. He feels like someone who understands the evidence before he understands what it's doing to him. Jane is not just Daniel's girlfriend. She is the film's faith character. Her art gives the movie its most direct spiritual language. She has a religious background. She nearly became a nun. Her crisis is not that she stopped believing in God, it's that she lost faith in people. That's important. Because the movie is not asking whether aliens disprove God. It is asking whether humans are mature enough to expand their idea of creation. Sister Mora's loophole, rationale, whatever, matters because it gives the film theological release valve. The Bible says humans are God's supreme creation on earth. That leaves room for other creations elsewhere. So Jane becomes the bridge between fear and faith. She is also the character whose body is violated by Noah's remote possession. That makes her spiritually part of the conflict, not just background. Noah does not just attack Daniel through Jane. He attacks Jane through her faith. Eve Hewson is another interesting piece of the cast because she has quietly been stacking strong recent work. And yeah, Eve Hewson is Bono's daughter, which is a little, kind of hits differently for me because U2 has had a real impact on me throughout my life. But she is not just a famous musician's kid showing up in a Spielberg movie. She has been building her own lane with Bad Sisters, Flora and Son, and The Perfect Couple. In Disclosure Day, she brings that current momentum into a much bigger studio film. So even if Jane is not the largest role in the movie, Hewson brings current momentum to it. She feels like an actor moving from strong streaming and indie work into a larger studio spotlight. I've always liked that Colin Firth works from the opposite direction. He's not the obvious alien conspiracy villain, and that is why the casting is interesting. His background in prestige drama, The King's Speech of course, spy stories like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and action work like Kingsman gives him a polished authority, not to mention he was also in Mary Poppins Returns with Emily Blunt. In Disclosure Day, he does not need to look monstrous. He looks respectable, and that makes the threat feel colder. Colin Domingo is fantastic as Hugo. He brings warmth and grounding to a movie that really needs it. Every time he shows up, the film feels more human, more centered. Domingo's genre background is stronger than people may first realize. He has had a major horror credit through The Fear of the Walking Dead, where he played Victor Strand across the show's run. It gives him an apocalypse survival credibility. He was also in Candyman, Zola, and Tom Clancy's Without Remorse, and voiced Unicorn in Transformers: Rise of the Beast. He was also in The Running Man in 2025, which keeps him connected to speculative action material, even as his prestige profile rises. Also, there are no mid-credit scenes, no post-credit scenes. The only thing after the credits is you arguing about the ending in the parking lot. So get up, out of your seat, take your stuff, don't leave a mess, and go argue. The movie opens at DEFCON 2. The United States is on the brink of war with North Korea. Tensions are maxed out, and where do we find ourselves? A chaotic wrestling event called Grudge Fest. Real-life wrestlers Lance Hoyt and Brian Cage are in the ring. It's loud, it's messy, it's very un-Spielberg on the surface. And to be honest, I thought I walked into the wrong film. It took me a moment to realize that I was looking at a forced drop. But here's Daniel Kellner, Josh O'Connor. All nervous energy and buried intelligence. He's stolen something: hard drives, classified files, and a cylindrical alien device they called a diving device. He's running from Wardex, Wave Recording Development and Extraction, headquartered in Occoquan, Virginia. They've been hiding the truth since Roswell, 1947. And once he's escorted outside and the Wardex agents have gone through the backpack to see if all the data drives are there, Noah Scanlon, the main antagonist, arrives and demands that Daniel give up the other whistleblowers. They've got his girlfriend, Jane, Eve Hewson. Daniel wants her back. And when he gets her, Daniel uses the device. It glows. The agents back off. Scanlon tells him not to squeeze it, to handle it with care. Daniel and Jane escape. That's the first minute of the movie. Spielberg drops you in mid-chase and says, "Keep up." Daniel and Jane find shelter at a monastery or a church. I'm not really sure which, but it's religious ground. And this is where we learn who these people are. Mother Superior Mora welcomes Jane warmly, which made me wonder about the depth of how religious or spiritual this film will be. As it turns out, Jane almost became a nun. She lost her faith in people, not in God. Initially, Jane portrays it the other way around, but later near the end, Mother Superior understands the truth that maybe Jane doesn't even realize. That distinction matters. Sister Mora, Elizabeth Marvel, great in this small role, tries to get Jane to stay for her own safety, but Jane refuses to be left behind. Daniel's past is different. He went to prison for cybercrimes, and the day he got out, Wardex recruited him in the parking lot. They saw a talented criminal and turned him into a tool. A whistleblower named Santiago shows up at the monastery or church or whatever. He was sent by the main whistleblower named Hugo Wakefield, played wonderfully by Colin Domingo. He's supposed to take Daniel to a safe house. Jane insists on coming along. Sister Mora lets them go, but you can see she is worried. They end up at a safe house in Indiana somewhere, and Jane finally demands the truth. Daniel shows her the decrypted files, and here's where Spielberg does something I genuinely did not expect. We see footage, 1970s footage, of Richard Nixon showing alien bodies to Jackie Gleason at Homestead Air Force Base in Florida. Makes sense as that's where Gleason's show was filmed. The bodies are labeled Vivo 4 through 10. Gleason looks genuinely shaken. It's grainy, it's unsettling, and it feels real in a way that digital effects usually can't fake. Then Daniel plays another file. This one is harder to watch. Vortex operatives are torturing an alien, interrogating it. The alien is screaming. It's not human, but you feel its pain. Jane is horrified. She almost became a nun. She believes in the sanctity of life, and she's watching her own government, or a shadow branch of it, do something unspeakable. She calls Sister Mora, not to come get her, to ask a theological question. If aliens exist, what does that do to the Bible? And Sister Mora gives her an answer that I think is the smartest moment in the script. She says the Bible tells us humans are God's supreme creation on earth. On earth. That leaves room. God could have created others anywhere else in the vastness of the universe. Some would call this a loophole. I call it a logical rationalization, and it's a beautiful one. And it restores something in Jane. Not her faith in God or people, that's still broken, but her faith that the universe makes sense. Now let's talk about Colin Firth, because this is the best scene in the movie. Vortex Section Chief Noah Scanlon has its own diving device, and he can use it to remote view, to possess people. He reaches into Jane's mind from across state lines. Jane feels him coming, and she fights back. She digs a crucifix necklace into her palm until she bleeds. The pain helps her resist. It physically weakens Noah. His team has to revive him, but he's patient. He tries again and again, and eventually he gets in. And here's the detail that gave me chills. Noah, virtually from across the table, quotes scripture at her, Matthew 26:39. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. It's Jesus in Gethsemane, begging to be spared his fate. Noah twists it. He uses it to manipulate Jane, to convince her that sparing humanity from the truth is a kind of mercy. He mentally programs her to kill Daniel, and he uses the Bible to do it. That's not a villain twirling his mustache. That's a true believer who has weaponized his own faith. Firth plays it with such quiet authority. He's not shouting, he's not angry, he's calm. And that's what makes him terrifying. One thing I haven't seen anyone talk about, the difference between what Noah does and what the real CIA remote viewing programs actually were. Remote viewing? That's been around for decades. In the 1970s and 80s, the CIA and military intelligence ran programs. Project Stargate, Sunstreak, Grill Flame, and they trained psychics to remote view, to describe distant locations, hidden objects, even Soviet military bases using only their minds. But here's the key. Real remote viewing was passive. They could see, they could describe, they could not control. They could not climb inside someone's mind and make them pull a knife. And the film calls this diving, which is a fascinating word. Diving suggests immersion, going into something, not just looking from above. So Spielberg isn't just using remote viewing as a plot device. He's taken a real phenomenon, one the U.S. government spent millions researching and asking, what if that technology was alien in origin? What if it could do more than observe? And what if the people who used it became something worse than spies? Something closer to demons. When Jane fights back with a crucifix, she digs it into her palm until she bleeds. That's not sci-fi. That's stigmata or exorcism imagery. And I think Spielberg knows exactly what he's doing. So no, remote viewing isn't new. A lot of people might think so. The files are declassified. You can read them yourself. Disclosure Day just gives it alien steroids. Meanwhile, in Kansas City, Missouri, Margaret Fairchild is having a very different kind of day. She's a presenter, meteorologist at KCXE. She wants to move to a bigger market. Her boyfriend, Jackson, Wyatt Russell, very chill, I'm fine with where we are. It's kind of a jerk. Doesn't understand why she's restless. By the way, Margaret is a rambler. She babbles, but she makes sense. A cardinal flies into her apartment. It's not a bird. It's a biological key. It activates something the aliens planted in her decades ago. We know something is different because during her wanting to relocate speech, she switches to Russian without realizing it. She rushes to work. She's singing along to Gwen Stefani in the car, full enthusiasm, no shame, gets pulled over for speeding, and here's where things get weird. She suddenly has telepathy and a case of empathy. She can feel the police officer is feeling. His marriage is struggling, his wife is upset, and Margaret tells him, out of nowhere, to buy his wife red velvet cakes. She's tired and needs a nap. They apparently have a newborn. You know how that is. The officer is so thrown that he lets her go. Or was it the first Jedi mind trick used in the film? She gets to the station. She's different now, more confident, more connected. She translates for a Korean guest off camera without missing a beat. Her co-workers are impressed but confused. She doesn't even realize that she translated. In her mind, it was all in English. Then she starts with the weather, on air, and something takes over. During her live broadcast, she starts speaking in clicks, a sine wave language. It's not human. The control room panics. Missouri watches. Quick note. Human beings actually have a clicking language. The Khoisan language of southern Africa and Xhosa and Zulu, which borrowed from them, uses clicks as normal consonants. Nelson Mandela was a native Xhosa speaker, so when Margaret clicks on live television, she's not making random noises. She's speaking a type of language real humans have used for thousands of years. Emily Blunt recorded all her own clicks, no AI in a studio with microphones, at her mouth and throat. She also learned enough Russian and Korean for the film. Later we learned what she was saying, translated by Daniel. Don't be afraid of what you don't know, but at the moment, it's chaos, and Emily Blunt plays it perfectly, terrified and liberated at the same time. After the live broadcast collapsed, we cut to Margaret in the hospital. This is where we get one of those classic Spielberg flicks, a smooth, rough, 60-second continuous tracking shot that follows Margaret and Jackson as they navigate out of the MRI area. It starts in that tight clinical space, machines humming, fluorescent lights buzzing, and then glides with them as they slip through a bathroom and into a neighboring room, using the hospital's layout like a maze to quietly sneak out. It feels like Spielberg doing a oneer, partly for the sheer joy of camera movement, but it also does quiet character work. This is where we learn her father had Parkinson's, a detail that pays off later when she has her panic attack in the piano crate and needs something physical and rhythmic to hold on to. Once they're out, the movie starts following Margaret's vibes. She and Jackson drive, trying to track down Daniel and warn him, while the DEFCON 2 backdrop finally bleeds into the street-level reality. People on the street acting like nuclear strike is imminent, stocking up, looking panicked and brittle. The global tension that's been in the abstract concept floating in the background up to this point suddenly feels very local. They pull into a gas station and Margaret is explaining that she is in the flow and that she would tell Jackson when she was there, mentally and emotionally. She tells him she needs to go east to meet Daniel. Jackson thinks Daniel is an old boyfriend. Margaret doesn't really explain it because I don't think she can. It's more of a vibe because she's in the flow. Spielberg plays it more quietly and honestly more painfully, actually. Jackson goes inside to grab a snack and, crucially, to call the hospital to tell them Margaret is having a mental breakdown and needs to be picked up. While he's doing that, Margaret is outside talking to a kid in a car next to theirs. She asks him for a favor. By the time Jackson comes back, she's gone. The boy looks up and says, "Hey, mister." She says she loves you and she's going east. It's a small, almost casual moment, but it tells you everything. Jackson is still trying to route her back into the system. Doctors, diagnosis, containment. While Margaret has already committed to the path the aliens opened. She doesn't argue, she doesn't make a speech. She just leaves a message and follows the pull. Daniel tells Jane he's going to contact Hugo and goes outside. Daniel is standing in a wheat field. He's on a burner phone with Hugo. Remember Colin Domingo, the Vortex defector, who's been building a resistance from the inside. Daniel receives a recording of Margaret's broadcast, and as he listens, a crop circle forms in the wheat around him. The symbols match the ones on the diving device. Of course, we all think of M. Night Shyamalan's Signs from 24 years ago. Everyone else hears gibberish, but Daniel's mathematical brain hears plain English. The aliens don't give him a language. They give him the framework to understand any language. Margaret instinctively calls Daniel. She can feel him. Their connection is telepathic now. She warns him that Jane has been hacked. Noah is controlling her. Daniel mounts a rescue, and here comes one of those Spielberg sequences I kind of mentioned in the non-spoiler. He steals a Wardex operative's car. He crashes straight through the wall of a safe house. It's a continuous 70-second tracking shot. No cuts, just chaos and momentum. He grabs Jane. They drive, but Jane is still under Noah's control, and she pulls a knife from her sleeve. She's ready to stab Daniel, but she fights it. You can see her hand shaking. She can see herself cutting herself. She's losing. Another operative's car sideswipes them. Jane's head hits the window. The impact breaks Noah's connection. They lead a chase to a cliff. Jane is a smart one and weighs down the gas pedal with rocks. The empty car plunges into the river. Wardex follows the car. See it in the river. Daniel and Jane escape into the woods. Hiding out in a roadside motel, Daniel shows Jane the broadcast to Margaret, which Jane hears only as gibberish. Daniel tells her he can understand Margaret. After the safe house incident, Jane is terrified of herself now. She begs Daniel to tie her up. I thought for Kiki sex. Now, she doesn't want to hurt him if Noah takes over again. Daniel spends the night translating Margaret's broadcast into mathematical formulas on the motel stationery. He's careful to hide the papers and anything else that can give it away, their location. Signs in the hotel stationery, so Jane can't see the location they're at. But Noah is patient. He possesses Jane again, and while Daniel sleeps, notes in hand, and Jane, still tied up, uses her foot to slide the math notes into view. Noah sees the hotel name. Santiago arrives to transport them, but arrives moments too late. Wardex's tactical team storms the motel while Jane manages to escape out the bathroom window. Daniel gives her the alien device to take with her, but Daniel is captured. Wardex takes him to a S4 military facility to inject him with truth serum, I think. Scanlon wants the device and the whistleblowers. Margaret is in the flow now. She's following her instincts, and her instincts tell her exactly where Daniel is. She drives to the S4 base. The guards stop her, and she pulls something I've never seen in a Spielberg film before, a Jedi mind trick. Her telepathic empathy lets her project herself as someone else. She becomes an old man, a father figure. The guards see what she wants them to see. They let her through. She walks into a room where Daniel is strapped to a chair. Noah is there. He confronts her, and then Margaret does something even stranger. She appears to Noah as someone else, his dead wife. The movie is kind of ambiguous, but I think it's her dead wife. Her name is Jocelyn. Noah is frozen. The sight of her, it broke him. Seeing her face now in this moment undoes something. He tells his men to let them go. They walk out. On the way out, many try to stop her, but Margaret engages with each of them personally and intimately, letting them know something personal about their lives, something that has bothered them. Then there's one woman. She's on screen for maybe 3 seconds. She sees Margaret, not even the alien, just Margaret, who has been altered by the aliens, and she starts to kneel, like Margaret is a saint, like she's witnessing a miracle, and Margaret says, no, no! She rejects it. She won't be worshipped. That's the film's warning. Disclosure won't just bring truth, it will bring cults, false prophets, people who see aliens and fall to their knees, people who see aliens and reach for their guns, people who see aliens and try to control the story. Margaret understands that the worst thing she could do is accept worship, because worship isn't listening. Worship is giving up your own agency, and the aliens, at least these aliens, don't want subjects. They want partners. That's the mature take. It's humble take, and it's the most Spielberg moment in the whole film. Even though it's not about a child or a glowing finger, it's about a woman saying no to power when it's handed to her. I wish more of the film operated at that level. But Boyd, Noah's right-hand man, played by Henry Lloyd Hughes, refuses the order. He grabs an SUV and a gun, and he is not letting them escape. Margaret and Daniel are stopped at a train crossing. Boyd slams his SUV into them. Their car is pushed onto the tracks and dragged by the train. Another train is coming from behind, another from the front. Boyd shoots at them, misses. They break the windshield, climb onto the hood, jump onto the train's ladder just as their car is crushed between two locomotives. Inside the train, they find themselves in a storage car full of pianos, crates of them, and Margaret has a panic attack. Her father had Parkinson's. She's been running from that memory. But the vibration of the piano strings, Daniel puts her hand on them so she can feel the flow. calms her down. It's a Spielberg moment, wordless, emotional, and I think earned. They escape on the train, they're walking down a road, a fox appears, not running away, watching them. And Daniel realizes the cardinal, the deer in the flashback, the fox. These are the aliens they've been watching the whole time. Now this reminded me of the 2002 miniseries Taken about alien abductions, where the alien shows up as cute animals. Now, most Gen Z weren't even born then. Fire trucks arrive, KCFD, but it's Santiago and the whistleblowers in disguise. They take Daniel and Margaret to Hugo. Hugo has built something incredible, a soundstage, and on that soundstage, a perfect replica of Margaret's childhood home. He calls it a psychological chamber. Daniel and Margaret hold hands, they use the alien device, and they unlock a repressed memory. Kind of reminds me of the X-Files, except no hypnotist required. February 23rd, 1996, young Margaret is singing "Someday My Prince Will Come" from Snow White. She's playing in the snow. Aliens, disguised as deer, a fox, a raccoon, and a cardinal, lure the children into the woods. The camera pans down. Animal footprints morph into three-toed alien tracks. They lead to a glowing UFO disguised as a house. Earlier in the film, while in the hospital after collapsing on camera, while delivering the alien message in the click language, Jackson blurts out that she sings in her sleep and has nightmares about Hansel and Gretel. This is the memory. The house is the alien craft appearing as a house. Inside, the aliens place a crown of diving devices on the children's head. They create a Rosetta Stone for humanity. Daniel gets mathematical brain to understand the aliens. Margaret gets telepathic empathy to understand humans. Together, they complete the translation. One alone can't do it. They're always meant to find each other, and it's an emotional core of the film, and it's beautiful. Unless, of course, they're Sith, where there's always going to be two. Hugo, discussing preparations with other whistleblowers, suddenly kicks them out of the room that he's in. Noah appears, virtually in his mind, I guess. He is remote viewing. Hugo felt it coming and didn't want the others around to be identified. They start talking. Noah is condescending to him, treating him like a traitor who doesn't understand the bigger picture. And Hugo says something that stopped me cold. He says, "I'm listening to you, Noah." That's the line, I'm listening. Not I hear you, not I understand, I'm listening. It's active, it's present, it's open. Then Hugo explains what he's learned from his extraterrestrial friends. They regard empathy as an evolutionary advantage, as the foremost evolutionary advantage. Not intelligence, not strength, not technology, empathy. Say what you want about this take, but what we as humans are doing doesn't seem to be working. Think about it. Every human empire, every military, every government secret, including Wardix, is built on the assumption that the species that controls information wins. That intelligence is the ultimate weapon. The aliens disagree. They say empathy is what matters. The ability to feel what another being feels, to listen, to connect. And that's very true in business. In my line of work, my job is to listen to people. And I run projects. And here's the devastating irony. Hugo is explaining this to Noah, a man who used an alien device to possess people, to violate their minds, to quote scripture while controlling their bodies. Noah has alien technology. He has power. He has information. But he has zero empathy. He's not listening. He's taking. So when Margaret ends the film by saying, "Listen," she's not just speaking to the global audience. She's speaking directly to the Noahs of the world, the people who think control is the answer, the people who have forgotten how to hear. That exchange, "I'm listening to you, Noah," is the film asking, which side are you on? The listeners or the invaders? And Hugo, by the way, is the only character who actually embodies both. He listens to the aliens, he learns from them. He built the replica house to unlock memories, not to possess anyone. He smuggled out in vivo 17 in a bag and kept her alive for 5 years. Hugo is what Noah could have been, and Colin Domingo plays that with such quiet warmth. He's not preaching, he's just listening. Wardux treks him to the safe house, the warehouse, where the soundstage is. But Margaret uses the diving device to cast an illusion, hiding the entire house and the fire trucks inside the warehouse. The cosmic energy is too much. The crystal crumbles. It burns out. However, they do escape in the invisible fire trucks. They race to Margaret's news station, KCXE. They're going to broadcast everything. Once there, Margaret uses her powers, convinces the director to give her the anchor chair, and to allow Daniel to access the control room. Daniel uploads the archive. Real-world NBC producers at 30 Rockefeller Plaza actually paused to verify the footage isn't AI generated before broadcasting it globally. That's a nice touch. The film acknowledges how skeptical we become. Just before they go live, Warnock's cuts the power to the entire city block. They blow the backup generators. Jane arrives. She has Daniel's device. She made it. Margaret takes the device. She channels raw cosmic energy directly into the dead station's infrastructure. It's brutal. Her body is suffering, but she brings the broadcast back online. And the world watches. Epic archival footage. The 2015 Jacksonville Navy Tic Tacs. The 1960 Pier Blossom sightings. The 1965 Kecksburg crash. Black and white Roswell footage with clipboard explicitly labeling the recovered entity as number 5 occupant. And then the torture footage. An alien screaming while Warnock's operatives interrogated. It's hard to watch. The film doesn't flinch. I will address this vital moment later in the video, so stay with me. Noah arrives with his team. He could stop the broadcast forcibly, on camera. His men are ready. They already took down the whole power in the block. But Noah looks at Margaret, sees the echo of Jocelyn in her, and he gives up. He sits down. He watches. Boyd walks out in disgust. He wants to fight. Noah lost his nerve. It's a strange moment. Some critics say it's unearned, but I think the film earns it through the Jocelyn reveal. Noah was never protecting the secret because he believed in it. He was running from his own pain, and Margaret, without knowing it, gave him a reason to stop. At least that's the way I see it. And then Hugo brings out the big plastic bag, zipped, protective. He's been smuggling this alien for 5 years. It arrives a moment before at the studio's cargo bay. He unzips it. Inside is In Vivo 17, a towering, ancient gray alien in a wheelchair. And here's the detail that broke my brain. Egyptian hieroglyphs on the uniform. The alien has been here before, thousands of years ago. Ancient Egypt. The implications are enormous. Were the aliens worshipped as gods? Did they help build something? The film doesn't answer. It just shows you the hieroglyphs and moves on. The alien stands. It's tall, frail, but powerful. It walks to Daniel and it clicks, a rapid mathematical message, directly into Daniel's ear. All this clicking in people's ear reminds me of the film The Empty Man that came out during the pandemic. Daniel's mathematical brain translates. He whispers the translation to Margaret. We don't hear him. The film keeps it from us, but we learn through Margaret's reaction that the alien is pleading, step back from the brink of war. Don't destroy yourselves. We've been watching, we've been waiting, and we need you to listen. Margaret internalizes it. She turns to the camera, she looks at 8.3 billion people, and she says one word. Listen. And cut to black. No post-credit scene, nothing. Tony Soprano vibes. Since I posted my non-spoiler review on Friday, the scores have come down a little, which is pretty normal once critics and general audience start weighing in. As of this recording, Disclosure Day is still landing pretty well, but not at instant classic levels. Rotten Tomatoes is hovering around 80 to 82% fresh, Metacritic is on the mid-70s, IMDb is around 6.9, and Letterboxd is around 3.4. That shift lines up with a larger conversation around the movie. A lot of people are praising Spielberg's craft, Emily Blunt's performances, Coleman Domingo's presence, the chase sequences, and John Williams' score. But the ending, the uneven CGI, and some of the unanswered questions are clearly pulling the audience response down a bit. At the box office, the film opened at number 1 with about $44 million domestic and roughly $93 million worldwide. AP also reports a $115 million production budget and a B cinema score, so it's a solid start for an original Spielberg sci-fi film, but it will need strong legs through the summer. No mid-credit scene, no post-credit scene. The only thing after the credits is you arguing about the ending in the parking lot. I'm looking at Disclosure Day purely as a cinematic science fiction, and I stand by my 4 out of 5 rating. I think it's incredibly strong in what they're trying to do. and that strength is baked into both Spielberg's intent and the film's own text. Spielberg has been clear that he didn't want to make another hostile visitor movie. He wanted to make a film about benevolent space, about intervention instead of invasion. A lot of people have pointed out that he returned to this genre now because he sees humanity as lost, and this story becomes his way of offering a kind of unifying thought experiment. The aliens' entire culture is built on empathy, and they only step in to keep us from destroying ourselves in a third world war. That alone already separates Disclosure Day from the usual alien invasion template. This isn't about fending off external threat. It's about whether we're capable of surviving our own instincts long enough to hear the warning. And for me, that's the key. Disclosure Day is less about aliens and more about us. The movie uses the revelation of we're not alone as a mirror turned back on human ignorance, our information silos, and the way elites treat everyone else, like cattle who can't handle the truth. In that sense, the aliens stand in for the ultimate undeniable truth, something bigger than our government, church, or corporation. The real conflict isn't whether they exist, it's whether we can learn to communicate honestly, share what we know, and actually listen to each other in time to matter. There are plenty who love to say, why doesn't Daniel just dump all this stuff on the internet? On paper, that sounds like the obvious move, but in our current deepfake AI slop reality, that's exactly how you guarantee no one believes you. The film quietly understands this. If Daniel or Hugo anonymously uploaded those files, they'd vanish into the noise within an hour. Instead, the characters take the data to a trusted news station and essentially force real journalists to do what they're supposed to do: verify it isn't synthetic and put their reputation on the line. By the time he gets out of Missouri to The Nation, the cutaway to NBC producers at 30 Rock fact-checking the footage before they roll it globally is more than window dressing. It's the movie acknowledging how broken our trust in images has become. That broadcast then jumps from local to global. Other networks pick it up. Anchors around the world react in real time. And suddenly, it isn't just a leak. It's a viral event civilization can't scroll past. And even then, it's not the files that seal the deal. It's the body. It's the alien. You can debate video forever. You can argue about metadata, compression, artifacts, AI fingerprints. But you can't upload a living alien to Dropbox. When Hugo wheels in Vivo 17 onto the stage, a towering, frail, ancient alien being with Egyptian hieroglyphs on his uniform, the argument's over. That moment is the trump card. Physical, undeniable, in front of multiple cameras, live. The film is basically saying, this is what it would actually take in 2026 to break through the skepticism we built to protect ourselves from manipulation. Another criticism I push back on is the idea that Hugo could have just blown the whistle years ago and been done with it. The replica house sequence is Spielberg's answer to that. The aliens aren't just dropping data. They've engineered two people as living Rosetta Stones. Daniel as the math, logic key, Margaret as the empathy, emotion key. He decodes the structure of the message. She decodes the hearts it has to pass through. Together, they can translate not just the language, but the intention behind it. Hugo doesn't have that. He can smuggle, he can hide, he can prepare the stage. But without the pair of them, the message either doesn't get through or gets distorted. In other words, disclosure isn't about having the files. It's about having the right bridge between species. This is where the film sits firmly in the benevolent warning tradition of sci-fi, and I think a lot of demonic deception critics are missing that lineage. You got Klaatu in The Day the Earth Stood Still, coming to warn us before we blow ourselves up. The beings in the abyss watching to see whether we're too violent to live with. The heptapods in Arrival gifting us a new way to experience time. Even E.T. in Close Encounters, where the visitors are not angry gods but something closer to curious neighbors. Disclosure Day mostly sits with those. These aliens are not here to conquer or feed. They're here because we're on the edge of self-destruction. But Spielberg doesn't make that soft. They alter children. They move through animals, memory, math, and devices we barely understand. They're trying to help, but they remain unsettling. More like a spiritual intervention than a rescue mission. That's where the spiritual side of the film kicks in. Alien Contact doesn't just challenge science. It challenges the stories people use to make meaning. Jane is the faith lens of the movie. She's not just Daniel's girlfriend. She's the character who almost became a nun, who lost faith in people more than God. Her crisis is simple and brutal. If aliens exist, does that blow up everything she was taught? The film answers that with Sister Mora's on-earth line, an elegant little theological rationalization that widens the frame without burning it down. Humans are described as God's supreme creation here. That doesn't rule out other creations elsewhere. Creation doesn't have to stop at our atmosphere. That's not a new question in alien stories. Even a comedy like Paul uses Ruth's crisis of faith to poke at the same thing. Does new knowledge destroy belief or force it to grow? Disclosure Day just plays the same chord in a more serious key. Noah, on the other hand, shows you what happens when faith curdles into control. He doesn't just cover up evidence, he invades minds, quotes scripture to justify possession, and turns belief into an instrument of domination. He's not only a government-adjacent villain, he's a spiritual one. He represents the cover-up as a kind of demonic remote viewing. Control over images, bodies, language, and ultimately over how people are allowed to interpret reality. That's why the film's final word matters so much. Listen, as command and test. When Margaret turns to the camera and says, listen, it's doing three things at once, I believe. It's the alien's plea, step back from the brink, don't destroy yourselves, and in some ways it's a spiritual command. Stop shouting long enough to hear something beyond your own fear. And it's a challenge. After everything you've seen, are you actually willing to listen, or do you just want a bigger explosion? And who do we need to listen to? It's not the aliens. They've been here forever. They're not going to solve our problems. We the humans are. We need to listen to each other. Spielberg refuses to show Monday morning because that's not his job here. He's not giving us a clean answer about geopolitics or religion after disclosure. He's putting the question in our lap and walking away. So no, Disclosure Day doesn't solve the philosophy of first contact. It raises a lot more questions than answers, but that's the point. Philosophy has always been better at asking the right questions than at handing out neat solutions. This movie does the same thing. It answers what it can on human scale and leaves the civilization level stuff hanging, because that's not something a 2.5-hour film can honestly wrap up. And before I wrap up, I need to point out something strange, something that feels almost like a marketing tie-in, but isn't. At least I don't think it is. Disclosure Day opened June 12th. The next day, the Pentagon released its third major batch of UAP files, or UFOs if you like the old term. 53 documents, 6 videos, 10 images from the CIA, FBI, and NASA. CBS and News Nation covered it. The videos show orb-like objects moving silently, changing direction suddenly, changing shape, hatching smaller lights. Federal agents in 2023 reported orange orbs dropping objects like grapes from a basketball. One FBI agent asked the other, "Are you seeing this?" The CIA recommended debunking UFOs back in 1953 to avoid morbid national psychology. Wardex just took that further. So no, the film isn't a documentary, but the real world is asking the same question, and perhaps it is time to really start asking these questions seriously. What are they hiding, and are we ready to listen? The film asks that. The Pentagon files ask it too, and neither one gives you a clean answer. So for me, Disclosure Day works because Spielberg is not trying to answer every question he raises. That will frustrate some people, and I understand why. The movie opens the door to huge ideas: alien life, faith, war, government, secrecy, human empathy, and what happens when the truth finally breaks loose. Then it stops right at the edge. But that is also why the movie stuck with me. The final word is not believe, it's not submit, it's not panic. It is listen. And that feels like the whole movie in one word. Listen before we destroy ourselves. Listen before we turn fear into violence. Listen before faith becomes control. Listen before proof becomes just another thing to argue about. Disclosure Day is not perfect. Some of the CGI does not work. Some of the alien devices feel too convenient. and I still feel the ending will split audiences right down the middle. But I respect the choice. Spielberg leaves the aftermath to us, because the question was never just about aliens. The question was whether humanity could be trusted with the truth. That is my spoiler breakdown of Disclosure Day. Now I want to hear from you. Did the ending work, or did Spielberg cut away from the most interesting part among Spielberg alien films? Hit like, subscribe, and stick around for more sci-fi, horror, action-adventure, prop culture, and all things geek here on A Constantly Racing Mind, where every frame tells a story. Also, check out the Intelligent Filmgoers apparel through the link in the description. And before your next theater trip, check the RunP app so you know the best time to step out without missing something important. Watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.